must formerly, from the accounts of the old navigators, have been much more so. One day I observed a cormorant playing with a fish which it had caught. 8 times successively the bird let its prey go, then dived after it, and although in deep water, brought it each time to the surface. In the zoological gardens I have seen the otter treat a fish in the same manner, much as a cat does a mouse. I do not know of any other instance where Dame Nature appears so wilfully cruel. Another day, having placed myself between a penguin Aptenodytes demersa and the water, I was much amused by watching its habits. It was a brave bird, and till reaching the sea it regularly fought and drove me backwards. Nothing less than heavy blows would have stopped him. Every inch he gained he firmly kept, standing close before me, erect and determined. When thus opposed, he continually rolled his head from side to side in a very odd manner, as if the power of distinct vision lay only in the anterior and basal part of each eye. This bird is commonly called the jackass penguin from its habit, while on shore, of throwing its head backwards and making a loud strange noise, very like the braying of an ass, but while at sea and undisturbed, its note is very deep and solemn, and is often heard in the night time. In diving, its little wings are used as fins, but on land as front legs. When crawling, it may be said on 4 legs, through the tussocks or on the side of a grassy cliff. It moves so very quickly that it might easily be mistaken for a quadruped. When at sea and fishing, it comes to the surface for the purpose of breathing with such a spring, and dives again so instantaneously, that I defy any one at first sight to be sure that it was not a fish leaping for sport. 2 kinds of geese frequent the Falklands. The upland species, Anas magellanica, is common, in pairs and in small flocks throughout the island. They do not migrate, but build on the small outlying islets. This is supposed to be from fear of the foxes, and it is perhaps from the same cause that these birds, though very tame by day, are shy and will in the dusk of the evening. They live entirely on vegetable matter. The rock goose, so called from living exclusively on the sea beach, Anas antarctica, is common both here and on the west coast of America, as far north as Chile. In the deep and retired channels of Tierra del Fuego, the snow-white gander, invariably accompanied by his darker consort, and standing close by each other on some distant rocky point, is a common feature in the landscape. In these islands, a great loggerhead duck or goose, Anas brachyptera, which sometimes weighs 22 pounds, is very abundant. These birds were in former days called, from their extraordinary manner of paddling and splashing upon the water, race horses, but now they are named much more appropriately steamers. Their wings are too small and weak to allow of flight, but by their aid, partly swimming and partly flapping the surface of the water, they move very quickly. The manner is something like that by which a common house duck escapes when pursued by a dog. But I am nearly sure that the steamer moves its wings alternately instead of both together as in other birds. These clumsy loggerhead ducks make such a noise and splashing that the effect is exceedingly curious. Thus we find in South America 3 birds which use their wings for other purposes besides flight: the penguins as fins, the steamer as paddles, and the ostrich as sails. And the apteryz of New Zealand, as well as its gigantic extinct prototype, the Deinornis, possess only rudimentary representatives of wings. The steamer is able to dive only to a very short distance. It feeds entirely on shellfish from the kelp and tidal rocks. Hence the beak and the head, for the purpose of breaking them, are surprisingly heavy and strong. The head is so strong that I have scarcely been able to fracture it with my geological hammer, and all our sportsmen soon discovered how tenacious these birds were of life. When in the evening, pluming themselves in a flock, they make the same odd mixture of sounds which bullfrogs do within the tropics. In Tierra del Fuego, as well as in the Falkland Islands, I made many observations on the lower marine animals, but they are of little general interest. Footnote. I was surprised to find, on counting the eggs of a large white doris, how extraordinarily numerous they were. This sea slug was 3½ inches long. From 2 to 5 eggs were contained in a spherical little case, each 3/1000th of an inch in diameter. These were arranged 2 deep in transverse rows, forming a ribbon. The ribbon adhered to the edge of the rock in an oval spire. One which I found measured nearly 20 inches in length and half in breadth. By counting how many balls were contained in 1/10 of an inch in a row, and how many rows in an equal length of the ribbon, on the most moderate computation there were 600,000 eggs. Yet this doris was certainly not very common. Although I was often searching under the stones, I saw only 7 individuals. No fallacy is more common with naturalists than that the number of an individual species depend on its powers of propagation. End footnote. I will mention only one class of facts relating to certain zoophytes in the more highly organized division of that class. Several genera, Flustra, Escara, Celeria, Chrysia, and others, agree in having singular movable organs attached to their cells, like those of Flustra avicularia found in the European seas. The organ, in the greater number of cases, very closely resembles the head of a vulture, but the lower mandible can be opened, much wider than in a real bird's beak. The head itself possessed considerable powers of movement by means of a short neck. In one zoophyte the head itself was fixed, but the lower jaw free. In another it was replaced by a triangular hood with beautifully fitted trapdoor, which evidently answered to the lower mandible. In the greater number of species, each cell was provided with 1 head, but in others each cell had 2. The young cells at the end of the branches of these corallines contain quite immature polypi, yet the vulture head attached to them, though small, are in every respect perfect. When the polypus was removed by a needle from any of these cells, these organs did not appear in the least affected. When one of the vulture-like heads was cut off from the cell, the lower mandible retained its power of opening and closing. Perhaps the most singular part of their structure is, that when there are more than 2 rows of cells on a branch, the central cells were furnished with these appendages of only 1/4 the size of the outside ones. Their movements varied according to the species, but in some I never saw the least motion, while others, with the lower mandible generally wide open, oscillated backwards and forwards at the rate of about 5 seconds each turn. Others moved rapidly and by starts. When touched with a needle, the beak generally seized the point so firmly that the whole branch might be shaken. These bodies have no relation whatever with the production of the eggs or gemmules, as they are formed before the young polypi appear in the cells at the end of the growing branches. As they move independently of the polypi and do not appear to be in any way connected with them, and as they differ in size on the outer and inner rows of cells, I have little doubt that in their functions they are related rather to the horny axis of the branches than to the polypi in the cells. The fleshy appendage at the lower extremity of the sea pen, described at Bahia Blanca, also forms part of the zoophyte as a whole, in the same manner as the roots of a tree form part of the whole tree, and not of the individual leaf or flower buds.